I hope you guys enjoyed Rebirth as much as I did. There were so many great moments in this game, from lighthearted funny moments to moments that really pull on the heartstrings. This game had it all. The initial plan was to power through the story and get a video out ASAP, hoping I could point out things others might have missed, but I could not for the life of me put the damn controller down. I actually finished the game on March 5th, but I just had to jump right in and play hard mode. So needless to say, I'm a little late. There's so much to discuss, so let's get into it, and please consider subscribing for other Final Fantasy content. Before I get into this, let me be as clear as possible. I'm not denying the existence of different worlds, timelines, or universes. It really comes down to semantics at this point. We're all basically saying the same thing, but it's a matter of whether or not these worlds exist as part of the livestream, or if they are literally completely separate worlds, with the livestream acting as sort of a hub between them all. I feel like one thing was made clear though, and that is there is only one planet. One thing that's crucial to understanding the ending, and honestly most of Rebirth, is a certain NPC's dialogue. If you're like me and listen to every single piece of dialogue, even if it seems minor, then I'm sure you noticed the dialogue in Cosmo Canyon by a certain NPC at the seminar. It's easy to miss since you can proceed forward and skip it unintentionally, but to summarize the dialogue, the NPC believes her parents are in another plane of existence or an alternate world. She comes across a theory that discusses what the livestream is and how it's a manifestation of our knowledge and memories, but the important part is she questions whether or not we retain our hopes and dreams. She says, what if spiritual energy doesn't distinguish between our real, lived memories and the unrealized desires buried deep in our hearts? What if coming into contact with that energy allowed us to peer through the looking glass, so to speak? This is one of the most important lines in the game that strongly suggests these alternate worlds take place in the livestream. If this is the case, then Zack and Biggs are actually dead and their journey takes place in the livestream. But at the same time, it kind of makes you wonder if they're not dead and the livestream is just like a hub for different parallel worlds, including the main world in Remake Trilogy and the original Final Fantasy VII world. Or perhaps Remake is just another livestream world to the original game because of the rift in the sky at the end of the game. I'll discuss the rift and more later on. I think with respect to the original game, I'd have to say the alternate worlds are essentially the hopes and dreams of the dead, and we just happen to see Biggs and Zack's point of view. Almost like a purgatory pocket before their souls fully return to the planet. There are so many hints that suggest they're dead. Things like their eternal clocks being broken, or when they describe their final moments, or even Aerith feeling Zack's presence in the Cave of the Gi. And as mentioned by the NPC, spiritual energy can't distinguish between our real, lived memories and the unrealized desires buried deep in our hearts. I think this is exactly what we're seeing with Zack and Biggs. I'll discuss this more, as well as Aerith's Dream World 2 a little later on. With that out of the way, let's discuss the ending and what it all means. I'll discuss things like why Cloud has the black materia at the end, what's going on with the white materia, and the different worlds we see. I'll also discuss the rift in the sky, as well as the rainbow effect. I'm sure most people at this point have made the connection that the rainbow effect is essentially the creation of a new world. It makes sense because it seems to appear whenever fate is challenged, and according to Sephiroth, he pretty much says when fate is challenged, new worlds are born. I do think there's more to this rainbow effect than the birth of alternate worlds though. The rainbow effect has been happening throughout the entire game, but you might not have noticed because it's not happening during moments when fate is challenged. This is going to sound a little weird, but hear me out. We see the rainbow effect every single time we cast a spell. We see the rainbow effect when a summon's ready to be called, and we even see the rainbow effect with Aerith's abilities. So what exactly is this rainbow effect? Rather than restrict the concept to appearing when fate is challenged, I think it's more of an effect in which the livestream is accessed. Like you're in tune with the livestream or communicate with its spiritual energy. At the beginning of the game, Sephiroth says, the knowledge of the ancients is sealed within each materia. The knowledge not only connects us to the planet, it allows us to tap into her power. That's how we can use magic. This explains why the effect appears when party members cast magic spells. Everyone in the party can't harness this energy the same way Aerith can, so it makes sense for the effect to be very prominent in Aerith's abilities too. Alright, so the question is, how does this relate to the rainbow effect we see when fate is challenged, or in the alternate worlds? Basically, what I'm trying to say is I think the rainbow effect is the creation of a rift in space to access the livestream's spiritual energy, whether it's from casting spells, summons, or challenging fate. And as the Cosmo Canyon NPC put it, what if coming into contact with that energy allowed us to peer through the looking glass? So what if the rainbow effect we see during Aerith's death scene is the spiritual energy creating a rift in essentially a world that doesn't distinguish between Cloud's real, lived memories and the unrealized desires buried deep in his heart? Fate was challenged, and according to Sephiroth, this event produced a new world, and perhaps it's based solely on Cloud's unrealized desires, or in other words, his desire to save Aerith. I believe this is the case, and it's because of these observations that I think these alternate worlds take place within the livestream rather than separate parallel worlds. The look on Sephiroth's face tells me that Cloud is doing exactly what he wants him to do. Create a new world to fracture Cloud's mind even more than it already is, and conveniently, the wall of whispers blocking the rest of the group dissolves immediately afterwards because Sephiroth accomplished his goal. But alright, so what about Tifa? Well, I'm not here with all the answers, I'm merely drawing my own conclusions based on what I saw, but perhaps she sees a glimpse of the world Cloud created because of her own experience in the livestream. Could it be a mild case of Mako poisoning? Or because of her own experience in the livestream, is she more in tune with what lies beyond the rift Cloud created, which could allow her to see into this new world as well? Hopefully part 3 will expand on why she was able to briefly see what Cloud saw. At this point in the story, Cloud has pretty much gone off the deep end mentally. I think that was made obvious during the events at the Temple of the Ancients. If we think back to the original game, not much remains between the Forgotten Capital and the Northern Crater, which ultimately ends with Cloud handing over the Black Materia. So if there's one thing I can say I'm pretty confident about, it's that Aerith is indeed dead. Cloud's fractured mind is bouncing between reality and this new world created based on his unrealized desires. Perhaps this is why he can see the rift in the sky. I'll discuss this more a little later on. So let's talk about the other rainbow effects we've seen. As I mentioned earlier, I don't think the rainbow effect strictly represents a new world being created. Aerith has the power to control this spiritual energy because, for one, she's an ancient, and two, we've seen several instances of her harnessing this power, from her standard abilities to her manipulating the livestream in the Temple of the Ancients. These instances aren't changing fate, so when she pushed Cloud in the church, she was using the spiritual energy to create a rift to send Cloud's spirit back to his body, and of course pass on the white materia. We also saw the rainbow effect during Biggs and Zack's death when the Whispers intervened. I still believe they died, but the Whispers and Rainbow we saw was Aerith guiding their souls to this other world. I'd assume this was to prevent their souls from fully returning to the planet. Just, the dialogue between Zack and Biggs throughout the game really leads me to believe they're dead. Zack even acknowledges that perhaps Aerith was the one to save him, and Biggs states that the wind was tugging so hard it felt like it was tearing his soul right out of his body. And it's also worth mentioning the scene in Remake in which Aerith does a little prayer right before the pillar collapses. It's possible this was for Biggs, and perhaps she said a prayer for the Whispers to pick up his soul once he passes. And who the hell knows, maybe her prayer at the very beginning of the game was to save Zack's spirit. Zack is understandable, but why Biggs? Well, the novel Traces of Two Paths does confirm that Aerith and Biggs were childhood friends, so maybe that's the reason. There's basically an epic chess match between Aerith and Sephiroth taking place in the background. Perhaps Aerith specifically needed Biggs and Zack's souls for her overall plan. I don't know, man, I'm just discussing and hoping to engage you guys. Alright, I think that's enough about the rainbow, but there's still a lot to talk about. I have a few things to say about the different stamps we've seen. Most people have probably been using these as a marker of worlds, but I wanted to throw out the idea that perhaps the stamps are marking a specific person's world. I'm not too confident on this, but hear me out and feel free to critique it or expand on it. Let me put it simply, and then I'll expand on each thought process. And remember, I believe these worlds take place in the livestream and are not separate worlds of living people. As I go through each point, I'll point out reasons why I think these worlds are in the livestream. Also, I don't know my dog breeds, so please bear with me. And just to be clear, when I say each dog represents a specific person's world, I don't mean to say these are completely separate from each other, because we clearly see these characters interact with each other regardless of which breed is shown. It's more like each dog represents a specific person's purpose or point of view. Alright, so the Terrier represents Zack's world, the Pug represents Biggs' world, the Collie or Pomeranian represents Aerith's world, the Shiba Inu or Corgi is perhaps Sephiroth's world, and then maybe an unknown represents Cloud's world. And I have a few things to say about the original stamp seen in Remake, but I'll save that for the end. The Terrier at the end of Remake was the first time we saw a different breed of stamp, and since then I've always associated the Terrier with Zack, as I'm sure you all have. Whether I thought it was a timeline, a world, or even a livestream sequence, that's who I associated the breed with. As we play through Zack's segments in Rebirth, it's apparent that he's still hoping to be that hero he always wanted to be. And let's be honest, Zack is a hero. Anyways, we see him save Aerith and take care of Cloud throughout the game. And keep in mind the NPC dialogue about hopes and dreams in the livestream. This makes perfect sense for what we see in the Materia world. As for why I believe this world takes place in the livestream, well, it's because of the memories. Starting with the beginning sequence where Aerith's white materia hits the ground and bounces. The way the Shinra troops block him as he goes to see Hojo is pretty much the same shot during the moment he was killed. Cloud in a wheelchair is a nod to the sequence in Medial. Also, take note of the motorcycle. When he's choosing between paths, he's on this standard looking motorcycle, which we've seen before, but once he's in front of the troops, the bike is different. It almost looks like the Hardy Daytona, or in other words, the same bike Cloud was on in Shinra HQ. It's just another memory in the livestream. So how about the Pug world? Biggs made the decision to go down this path, and coincidentally, we see a new breed of stamp. Biggs is trying to find his purpose. Something that seems common throughout this game is finding your purpose or to take control of your life, and that anger or revenge isn't the answer. We know this because Cloud failed his trial in the Temple of the Ancients. This is a theme stressed by Aerith and Zack, while Sephiroth seems to feed into the idea that rage or anger is the answer. Biggs found his purpose in the wrong thing, and then he literally died moments later, which seems to bring that world to a close. I think there are clues that suggest this is in the timeline, and once again the clues are memories. We see the Shinra troops lined up just as we've seen before, and we also see a nod to Angeo when Zack helps Biggs onto his feet. It might be a stretch since they use different hands, but when I first saw Zack turn to help Biggs to his feet, I immediately thought to myself, damn, I've totally seen that before. So I don't know if this is a Kali or not, but I'll roll with it. We first see the Kali in Aerith's little date world with Cloud, which is why I'm using it as a marker for Aerith's world. She even states that it's her dream at the beginning of this sequence. It also seems like Cloud is about to ask the question, are we dead? Which to me implies that this world, much like the others, takes place in the livestream. Keep in mind, during this dream world, Cloud is unconscious after the events at the Temple of the Ancients, so it makes sense for Aerith to guide his consciousness to this dream world. Aerith is an ancient, so it doesn't take much to explain how or why this dream world exists. As for the hopes and dreams, I don't think it's much of a stretch to say this is Aerith's way of saying goodbye to Cloud, something we never really got in the original. It's also her chance to tell him about her feelings. And take note of the photographer mentioning how they seem to be dressed for a funeral. But what's interesting are the callbacks, or more specifically, the memories in this world. The date sequence is very reminiscent of when Zack bought Aerith her ribbon. It's later revealed the main purpose of this dream world was to give the white materia to Cloud, but I'll discuss the white materia and black materia in a moment. So now we have the Shiba Inu, or Corgi maybe? Again, I don't know my breeds, but who do we see right after this breed reveal? Sephiroth, of course, and his desire is to get Aerith, which is made obvious in the next scene. But I think the significance of the Shiba Inu is to show that Sephiroth is capable of traveling between these worlds. 1 minute he's right outside in the Shiba Inu world, and 2 seconds later he's in the Kali world. The entire dynamic between Aerith and Sephiroth during these livestream sequences reminds me of Livestream White and Livestream Black in On the Way to a Smile. I've referenced this book before, but I highly recommend you all read it to get a better understanding of their influences in the livestream. And as I mentioned earlier, it's just one epic chess match between the two. Now, I want to talk about a potential unknown stamp we'll see in part 3. With Cloud's mind completely screwed up, and with the Rift in the Sky, I feel like there's potential to see another stamp in part 3. It seems like each world with a Rift in the Sky has its own stamp, so it's very likely we'll see a new stamp to represent Cloud's point of view. But what I'm wondering is, if we do see a new breed, will Cloud make some kind of comment about how stamp changed? The party might act like, well, what the hell are you talking about? But I kind of feel like it might be more of a clue for the audience though, and not necessarily something referenced in-game. And lastly, I want to discuss the original Beagle stamp. I won't spend a lot of time on this because this is pretty much theory crafting territory. My very first video mentioned the idea that perhaps the entire remake series takes place in the livestream, and it's based on the memories of the original game. Obviously, there are so many things in that video that are flawed now that Rebirth is out, but since Rebirth introduced these new breeds, it really makes me wonder if the remake series is just another livestream world to the original game. Sephiroth said some worlds quickly perish while others endure. Perhaps the Beagle world is one of the worlds that endures while the other breeds quickly perish. And thinking about the idea that each of these worlds, including the Beagle, take place in the livestream, I'm reminded of the beginning of Ever Crisis. The livestream is the essence of the planet, a churning river of memories. As they come together and drift apart, a story is given shape, an unprecedented tale, another possibility. And then just the way it zooms in on one of these little sparkles and transitions into a battle with Cloud, Zack, and Sephiroth. Is this like some Horton Hears a Who type shit where every little speck is an entire world? Dude, I don't know. This is just a random thought I had that I wanted to share. Maybe I'll make another video exploring this idea further. So now I'd like to discuss what's going on with the white materia and the black materia. If you remember in Remake, Aerith says every time the Whispers touch her, she loses a part of herself. Later in Rebirth, it's revealed the white materia lost its color, and she mentions to Red 13 how the Whispers took the memories from her materia. My initial thought was Sephiroth robbed her of these memories to separate her from the white materia. The Whispers stole the memories and returned them to the lifestream. We later see it in Zack's world, or to put it simply, in the lifestream itself, because this is where Aerith hands it off to Cloud. They wake up together in the home where Zack was watching over them, which was the Terrier world, but she hands Cloud the materia in her world that we later learn to be the Kali world. Remember what I said about how the different breeds may represent character viewpoints. Cloud's outfit changed because this is what Aerith knows him as, whereas he's wearing the other outfit when Zack is involved. This is kind of why I think the breeds can be used to mark specific person's viewpoints or paths. These worlds are just hopes, dreams, and memories bleeding into each other, and they kind of overlap with each other. It just doesn't make sense to me for there to be a separate white materia and Aerith for every single dog breed, but I'd love to hear your interpretation. Anyway, she eventually hands the white materia off to Cloud and sends him back. This is immediately followed by Sephiroth walking into the church. What's interesting though is the way the Black Whispers are chasing after Cloud, almost as if they're trying to take the white materia back from him to keep it in the lifestream, or perhaps to keep it in a dying world to permanently remove it from existence if these truly are separate worlds. Cloud eventually ends up in the Sleeping Forest, and Sephiroth even comments about how the white materia doesn't belong there. And then notice how the White Whispers come in and change the scenery a little. It's like Aerith cleanses the area of Sephiroth's corruption. Aerith transfers the memories to her own materia, and Cloud is left with the hollow materia, which I believe is supposed to be symbolic of his current mental state. The thing about the clear materia is I think it might hold some significance in Part 3 and may be instrumental in Cloud recovering his mental state. Perhaps it turns into something once he regains control of his mind. Maybe it will be composed of memories of Zack and Aerith and you can perform synergy skills with them. Or maybe it will have some importance with the black materia. So why does Cloud have the black materia at the end of the game? Well, if you think back to the original, we learned the temple itself is the black materia. In Rebirth, you can see the temple condense into some sort of black matter and fall down into the giant chasm. This is in line with the original because that's exactly where the black materia ended up as well. However, Cloud pretty much immediately hands the black materia to Sephiroth. In Rebirth though, things play out differently. What's interesting is Sephiroth doesn't deny the black materia being fake. He does, however, say, this is the key which grants access to the true counterpart hidden between worlds. Shortly afterwards, he seems to spawn the so-called true counterpart, unless that's still the fake, but it definitely looks a little different from the one we saw earlier. Now, why Cloud has the black materia will likely be something explained in Part 3. Perhaps at some point, unknown to us, Sephiroth gave it to Cloud to maintain control over him. Or because Sephiroth wants Cloud to see between worlds and the black materia makes that possible? Maybe the clear materia is the black materia and Cloud doesn't realize they're one and the same. His mind is bouncing between reality and the world he created, so perhaps he sees either materia based on what his state of mind is currently in. Also, a little side note, but I wonder if the black materia will add some sort of mechanic to combat in Part 3. It's interesting how Cloud attaches it to the Buster Sword, so maybe we'll see something with that. I want to wrap this up by talking about the final scene. Believe me, there are so many things I want to talk about and expand on, but I didn't want my first video about Rebirth to be over an hour long. There's still so much to be said about Zack and his role in the entire chain of bosses at the end of the game, amongst other things throughout the entire game. I'll save those ideas for another video. Alright, so let's talk about Aerith at the end of the game. Is it Aerith from a parallel world because Cloud saved her? Is it Lifestream Aerith because she's dead and Cloud doesn't realize it? Or is it Jenova? If I haven't made it clear yet, I firmly believe these alternate worlds are just Lifestream shenanigans. I don't believe Aerith is alive in another timeline or parallel world. However, if this was the case, they could do something devastating with it. Imagine Cloud realizing the world is doomed because Aerith is alive somewhere in another plane of existence, then realizing he has to let her go or be the one to destroy her reality to save the world. That would be pretty damn heartbreaking, and if she really is alive, I hope they go in that direction. After my first playthrough though, I thought it might be possible Aerith is Jenova in this scene, but Red 13 sensing her really throws this off. It would be different if Red saw her just like Cloud since Jenova is capable of appearing as loved ones, but the fact that he only sensed her presence leads me to believe it's Lifestream Aerith. But I guess you could make the argument that the Aerith hanging around Red and the others is really her spirit, while the one Cloud sees and speaks to, coincidentally after noticing the black materia, is actually Jenova. I think this is a proper send-off of Aerith though. They even had a callback to Remake when Cloud asked if she'd be okay getting back. As I've mentioned before, I think Cloud's mental state is completely shattered. I mean, look at this face. That is the look of a man smiling through pain and doesn't even know what the hell's going on. It's like he's bouncing between reality and the world he created based on his unrealized desires. And remember the quote they've teased us several times. what is fact and what is fiction. I will say this though, I think if Cloud sees Aerith at any point in Part 3 prior to the livestream sequence, then that will be Jenova. Most likely at the Whirlwind Maze when all the crazy illusions are going on, or just somewhere near the northern crater. I think the key thing to remember here is Aerith says she'll stay behind in the City of the Ancients. So if Cloud sees her again in Part 3, it might make us wonder, well, wait a second, didn't she say she would stay behind? The tone in her voice when she says her final goodbye sounds sincere. Why would she say this by herself if it was Jenova? I guess you could argue it's for the audience, but still. I genuinely think this is Aerith, but there's definitely still potential to see Jenova Aerith in Part 3. Now, I'm not sure who the first person was to make the connection, but one of my friends sent me this picture. I'm not much of a social media guy, but the post apparently made the connection that the rift looks similar to the livestream sequence in the original game. The rift in the sky seems to be foreshadowing Cloud's livestream sequence. They look eerily similar, and to me this further supports the idea that these worlds are all part of the livestream. I think the livestream sequence is going to hit much harder in Part 3 than the original because not only will we have the whole thing with Zack, but I think we'll also get the scene where Cloud puts Aerith to rest in the water. I was so disappointed at first when we didn't get that scene, but I figured they're saving it for Part 3 instead. I mean, they have to, right? It's such an iconic scene. Cloud seems to be the only one that isn't completely devastated around the water, so once he learns the truth, it'll be pretty upsetting to see. I don't think he processed what happened. More evidence supporting this is the fact that he's the only one that didn't have a limit break when the fight against Jenova started. It also seems like the developers are setting up Cloud to go through the 5 stages of grief, and currently we're seeing denial. As per the definition, he's carrying on as if nothing happened, and it's common to feel the presence of someone who has died, hear their voice, or even see them. If the 5 stages of grief is truly what the developers intend to do with Cloud, then we'll likely see anger and bargaining in Part 3, while depression and acceptance are covered in Advent Children. I wanted to keep this video a bit broader in terms of details. I wrote down a ton of notes during my first 2 playthroughs, so I still have a lot to say. There's a lot of dialogue throughout the game I really want to dig into. If you guys enjoyed this video, hit that like button and please consider subscribing. Thank you so much for watching.